Reviews, algorithms, YouTube. It's more than just a linear site. It's a prism of endless possibility, where a single video can branch into infinite recommendations, creating alternate channels from the ones you know. I'm CBM Productions. I am your guide through these vast new videos. Follow me as I'll be reviewing What If. What is up everyone, I'm CBM Productions, and today we'll be looking at Marvel's first venture into the animation world, focusing on different scenarios within the MCU, changing it as we know it through the vast multiverse, What If. This show is one that I was fairly looking forward to. I'm a big fan of anthologies, whether you're talking about movies like Trick or Treat or VHS, or shows like Black Mirror. I always enjoy series that act as standalone movies basically, that all tied together in some way, with each episode or segment standing out from the one that came before it. So ever since this project was announced back at San Diego Comic-Con 2 years ago, it's been on my radar. But despite that, this was the first Disney Plus MCU show that I've seen thus far, where I didn't really watch it week to week. I basically watched until the series was wrapping up to binge it all at once. Something about the fact that it was animated, plus the fact that we were just focusing on alternate scenarios within the MCU, made it inherently less integral to me to watching it than the previous live action shows we've gotten. Despite this is still definitely in the MCU and definitely will affect future movies and shows. But does this show deliver on its central concept, and is another one for Marvel in the TV and animation department? Or are they just out of their element with this one? Well, let's get into the show and find out. What this show does best in my opinion is the fact that it does stand out from every single previous MCU installment. Considering this is the 29th installment of this universe, changing things up is key to making this universe still relevant and giving people a reason to stay invested and excited to see what's going to come in the future. And this show does a good job of feeling fresh, not just from the animation aspects, but also feeling like a comic book series come to life. From the writing, the voice acting, the story structure, the pacing, these episodes do feel like segments out of the comic book, and I do like that. Not to mention I do like the tonal balance of the show and being able to have your standard light MCU fare like the humor and such, making the show feel like it's in the MCU despite the fact it's not live action. But when it gets dark, this show goes places that no other MCU installment minus probably Infinity War have gone before. This is one of the strongest aspects of the show that it gets from the source material and being able to have these dark scenarios play out, and exploring them very well and ending on a dark cliffhanger to make you wonder what's going to happen next. And although this season does wrap up things nicely for the most part in a little bow, I did like the fact that some episodes were allowed to be dark and not like break that tonal consistency for a joke or something like that we've gotten previously in other movies. Well, with the exception of Marvel Zombies, but we'll get into it. But there's episodes like episode 3 for example, where Hank Pym kills the Avengers out of vengeance because of Hope's death due to S.H.I.E.L.D. Or episode 8 where Ultron wins his universe and just destroys everything a part of that, and then he ends up fighting the Watcher because he's so powerful. And personally my favorite episode of the series, which is most people's fan favorite, is the Doctor Strange episode in episode 4, where Doctor Strange loses Christine, his girlfriend, in the accident, and he ends up destroying his world trying to bring her back. It's one of the most emotional things in the MCU thus far, and it really is a tearjerker. And how his storyline wrapped up I thought was really satisfying. Also, the pacing on these episodes are very good as well. With the exception of the Thor episode, each episode has a great pace to it, and I didn't check the time on any of these episodes to see how much I had left. The 30-minute runtime suited these episodes really well. The voice actors reprising their roles from the MCU all do well because they're so naturally good at just bringing their characters to life. I'm honestly shocked the amount of people Marvel got to do this series for them. From Benedict Cumberbatch, Jeremy Renner, Chris Hemsworth, Michael Rooker, Paul Rudd, Paul Bettany, Karen Gillan, Evangeline Lilly, Michael B. Jordan, and so many more. Probably the two actors that most people were excited to see in this series was the late Chadwick Boseman playing T'Challa for one last time, and he does a great job in each episode he was in. Which just surprised me how much cross-pollination there was in multiple actors appearing in multiple episodes despite the fact they had to play different multiverse versions of the same character, which I thought was kind of creative. Considering I thought with the exception of Jeffrey Wright, the rest of the actors would just be in isolated scenarios and only be in one episode. Speaking of Jeffrey Wright, I was pumped to hear his voice in this. Having seen him in many things from the Daniel Craig Bond movies to Westworld, he's an amazing actor with a great voice, and he makes no exception in here. And his role as a Watcher in this is no exception. He is great as the Watcher because his monologues are just so soothing to listen to and just so interesting that he demands the screen in my opinion. And he's just a character that is just so interesting and just so secretive that you want to see more of his character very early on. Despite the fact he's mostly reduced in the first 7 episodes to just the monologuing, the opening and ending in the episode. And the way he does play into the final couple episodes with him having to break his vow and fighting Ultron and all that stuff, disrupting the multiverse, which kind of seems to be the trend for the MCU this year, and how the show explored the multiverse through the Watcher, like looking at all these universes like shattered glass that break into infinite pieces, and how the show will flip certain moments we've known from the MCU, like Hawkeye sacrificing himself for Black Widow, just like a flip on Avengers Endgame, or Killmonger killing Tony Stark like how he got killed in Black Panther, or all the iconic Captain America imagery now with Peggy Carter in the first episode, or in the final episode when all the multiverse characters suit up and team up together, and they have that panning shot just like in the first Avengers. I also really enjoyed that as well. The comedy writing here is pretty decent for the most part, has some good recurring jokes, has some good one-liners as standard for Marvel. I also really enjoyed the score as well, from the main theme to a lot of very good emotional beats we get in the later episodes. And this is kind of something I don't really say a whole lot, but I do love the credits in this. There's very little post-credit scenes this time around, which is kind of, odd for Marvel. But the fact we get to see all these beautiful backgrounds created for the show just in succession, showed like a slideshow, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it, especially with the score playing in the background. And the animation, while it's not the style that I would have gone for, does move fluidly for the most part, and you can tell Marvel did put some money into this project making it look good. And there are a lot of creative shots in this that do make it stand out in this first season. My favorite being the final shot in episode 4 whenever Doctor Strange's universe is collapsing down and it's just being reduced to a single bubble. It's one of the few shots in the MCU that generally did give me chills. And the season did leave me in a spot where it gave me a satisfying wrap up of the story, but did leave me wanting more and wanting to see future seasons of the show, with some improvements. Speaking of, this show, for all it does right, I do think it is the weakest Disney Plus Marvel show that we've gone out before thus far. That doesn't mean it's bad, it's still a good first season of TV, but I did have a lot of mixed quality on a lot of the episodes. Some of the episodes I talked about in the positives I did love, but there's also a lot of episodes like the Peggy Carter episode or the Thor Party episode that were just kind of monotonous, and this kind of just dealt with the same plot as the films they were just trying to parody, just from a slightly different angle, and they just didn't really do enough of the concepts, because the episodes really didn't have a whole lot of weight to them. And my least favorite episode of the entire season was the Killmonger episode. It wasn't terrible, but to me, it just felt incredibly uninteresting and incredibly dull, because it just tackled a scenario that was just slightly different from the one we saw in the movies. And for me, the concept itself just wasn't dark enough to where it pushed the MCU in a different direction or just pushed the boundaries, like what we saw with Doctor Strange or Ultron. It just felt incredibly sappy. And there were just a couple episodes in this season that just kind of felt rushed. Primarily Marvel Zombies and the Ultron episode, to where the 30-minute runtime was a detriment to the series, and there just should have been more time given to this world that they're setting up, and also how our characters got into the predicaments. What was also a negative for me is that the voices that Marvel couldn't get to reprise their roles, like Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, William Hurt, Tom Holland, Brie Larson, etc. The replacement voice actors that they got for these characters, for me, just didn't really fit the character at all and just felt incredibly distracting. With the only exception, kind of, was the replacement for Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. But even her, she kind of felt weak amongst the actual reprising actors, primarily in the Ultron episode where she's, basing off Jeremy Renner, and the fact that Jeremy Renner's trying to have these emotional ties to Black Widow, and the fact it's not Scarlett Johansson, did just kind of feel off. Along with that episode, despite the fact I really do enjoy it, the replacement that Marvel got for Ultron was also incredibly distracting, and was really the only negative I had towards that character. And despite the fact that, Mega Ultron, or whatever he's called in that, Ultron Prime, despite the fact how intimidating he is in the series in the last couple episodes, he would have been 10 times more effective had James Spader come back to do the voice. Because he just has that gravitas in his voice that, kind of like Jeffrey Wright, he just demands your attention every single scene he's in, especially in Age of Ultron. And in here, it just didn't feel right. Along with that, the animation style that the series went for, at least to me, wasn't the best Marvel could have gone for. Granted, this is their first venture into animation, along with just Disney Plus in general that Marvel's doing this year. It's a whole new challenge. But the style that the series went for just felt a little too glossy and chic for my liking. And some of the animation with how the characters move, and especially how some of the lip syncing for the actors just kind of felt out of sync with what the characters were saying versus the actual animation, looking like the animators dubbed over pre-existing footage, did distract me at points as well. Also, the show had a very uneven pace to it. I already mentioned that some of the episodes kind of felt up and down like waves and troughs, where you had some light episodes and some dark episodes, which I kind of liked. I liked the structure of that. But the show went from just being isolated incidents in the first 7 episodes, and then starting in episode 8, they just started tying everything together, and, for the most part, I was fine with that, but I wish that the show introduced that kind of tying everything together earlier on, because the way the series just kind of changed pace felt very jarring to me. Also, I felt like the show, to try and shock its audience, killed or neutered its characters way too much of the series, the major characters, just to try and show this universe isn't the one you knew before. Primarily Tony Stark, they kill him off so many times in this series, in episode 3, which I thought was fine. I thought that was a pretty good shock for the episode to start off with, but then you see he's turned to a zombie, and then he's killed by Killmonger, then he's killed by Ultron, and it's okay, we get it. And the same goes for Thanos. I mean, he's sliced in half by Ultron, he gets turned to a zombie, he gets turned to a joke in episode 2, Gamora takes over his plans. I mean, the guy's just, he's kind of watered down as well. And that was a big negative I have with the series, is that this is the first MCU installment to me that didn't really feel integral or important. Watching the series in succession episode to episode, in a whole binge session and not watching it week to week live, I don't regret my decision after binging it because to me, it just didn't really necessitate me watching it week to week. I didn't really have questions walking away from each episode going, I need to know what happens next, apart from episode 8 and 9. Those were the only ones. You know, it was the first series that I didn't feel the need to watch week to week. I didn't feel the need to, avoid spoilers and social media to avoid myself from, the shock of everything. I could just go on social media completely fine and not be worried about spoilers because it just didn't really feel as important to me as the shows or the movies have gotten previously. Stuff like WandaVision and Loki, those felt like trends, those felt like important discussions that you need to watch to understand what's going on. And despite where the series leads off, and I do want to see more from the series, I could happily wait a couple more years to see what happens with season 2. It's not like I'm gritting my teeth to see what happens next. I enjoy my time, but pretty much after this review, I probably won't think about it that much until the next season comes out. Which I don't think Marvel wants. I think they want you to theorize until really, count the days until the next season drops. But to me, I don't know, it just didn't really stick in a way that a lot of other Marvel properties have been. And it's kind of a shame because I think this series really could have gone for that, but maybe we'll see in future seasons. Overall, the first season of What If is definitely a trial and error run for Marvel in the animation department, but it's mostly another solid, satisfying piece of the MCU. It offers a different flavor of Marvel that we haven't seen before in this universe, has some fantastic dark episodes, really good voice acting from reprising actors in these roles, good score, good pacing, entertaining in some ways throughout each of the 9 episodes, and left me wanting to see where the show ends up next. But the animation can be kind of wonky in some points, and the style just doesn't click with me that much. The replacement voice actors weren't great in their parts. Some concepts definitely weren't worthy of having an episode made about them. The runtime did hitch a couple of the episodes for me from getting to fully explore the concepts. And overall, although it did satisfy me as a consumer of Marvel, I'm not walking away counting the days until we get a season 2 of this. It's a good series that will hopefully get improvements with later seasons. But any show that does reincorporate the Incredible Hulk in the MCU is a good show in my book. I give What If Season 1 a B-, a 7 out of 10, and a rental recommendation. So that's What If. What do you guys think about it? Leave your thoughts down in the comments and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my content. I'm CB Emma Productions and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.